With the announcement of Hulk vs Broly, we now know the entire lineup for Death Battle Season 7. And while I don't think this was a great season for matches, I'm still really excited for Season 8. They've said that Season 8 is going to be the season with all the highly requested legacy matchups, and Luis has even said that he thinks every single episode is worthy of being a season premiere or season finale. So I figured I'd try and predict some of these matches. I'll go over why I think they've got a chance of happening, whether or not I actually like them, and who I think would win. Though I've done no research into any of these matches, so take my word on the verdict with a grain of salt. There are some pretty notable matches that are outright confirmed that won't be on this list though, and that's because Nemesis is doing his own video on this same idea and I didn't want my matches to overlap with his at all. Go check his video out. He got first dibs, so his ones are far more likely to happen than most of mine. Him getting first dibs also meant I kinda had to stretch with some of my choices. Not all of them have that much history or are finale worthy, but Death Battle considered Virgil vs Sephiroth and All Might vs Might Guy as finale worthy matches, so who's to say. Anyway, I have 20 matches to go over, so I'll just start with those now instead of dragging this intro out any further. First on the chopping block is Piccolo vs Martian Manhunter. This isn't nearly as popular as it once was, and Goku Black vs Reverse Flash seems to be the more popular Dragon Ball vs DC match nowadays. But Piccolo vs Martian Manhunter definitely has more history just on the basis of Goku Black as a character existing for less than 5 years now. Manhunter probably wins because he's a DC Herald, of course he does, and that makes me sad since Piccolo is my favourite Dragon Ball character. I really want DC's non-Marvel win streak to end, but I just don't think Piccolo's going to be the one to do it. The fight has potential to be really interesting and creative though. Manhunter's super versatile, and his regeneration and intangibility could be used for some visually neat scenes. Piccolo's strategic ability could make for some interesting choreography, and I would love a scene where Manhunter uses his telepathy to absolutely just fuck with Piccolo's mind. Speaking of mind fucks, Mysterio vs Scarecrow is one of the few remaining Marvel vs DC fights that I actually really like the idea of. It has literally infinite potential in regards to creativity in the fight, and could be the most visually amazing animation the show has ever done. People want Mysterio to fight Freddy Krueger, but like, no? This is one of the few good Marvel vs DC fights left, and I don't want this to be the time when they finally say, nah, we should branch out a bit. Fights where the visuals are limited to nothing but the imagination are some of my favourite ideas, with even characters I don't care for. It's why I love Madara vs Aizen despite never watching Naruto or Bleach. It's why I, again, think Piccolo vs Martian Manhunter could have some cool scenes. The only issue I can see with this is Mysterio's suit blocking out the gases means he'd dominate most of the animation if he won, but I think there could be a workaround to that. Imagine a scene where Scarecrow breaks his helmet, turns the fight around and kills Mysterio, but then it's revealed that all of that was an illusion and then Mysterio kills him. Or if, even after that, Scarecrow's death was also revealed to be an illusion. I see them doing something similar to the illusion scene from Far From Home, which is one of my favourite scenes in the MCU. They can toy around with the idea of the audience never knowing what's real, and I would love that so damn much. And, you know, it's Marvel vs DC, so it's entirely possible. I could gush about this idea all day, but I'll move on for now. Mickey vs Bugs is a match that's been around for ages, but Nemesis is already covering that one. Which is good for me, because I've always preferred Donald vs Daffy. I don't think I need to explain why this match is so highly requested or how it has history. Seeing them dive into the deep history of both series would be amazing with just how much there is to go over. There's no way this would be animated in any way other than hand-drawn. If they give this a custom-rigged sprite treatment, I would genuinely hate that. I have no idea who wins, but I'd hope Donald would win. I've always preferred him. Yeah, I don't have much to say here. One of the main reasons I prefer this over Mickey vs Bugs is that there's significantly less chance here of them making a big Chungus joke in the analysis. Okay, this next one probably isn't happening, but I'm just gonna act like Hulk vs Broly doesn't exist for the time being and keep this match in anyway. Broly vs Asura has the potential to be the most destructive fight of the entire show. Asura's wrath is all about over-the-top destruction, and Broly's one of the most unhinged Dragon Ball characters. It could start out with Asura fighting more tactically and beating Broly until Broly gets too strong and gains the upper hand himself, causing Asura to become more and more angry. You could have both of them get lost deeper and deeper in their anger over the course of the fight, culminating in the final showdown between their final forms. Plus we can get an incredibly over-the-top animation with planets and stars exploding left and right. Maybe we'll finally even get a match that actually reaches galaxy level destruction in the animation. Now, yeah, Hulk vs. Broly does mean this is really unlikely to happen, but since they're using Super Broly to fight Hulk, they could very well use Z Broly to fight Asura, since that's far more thematic for both. I still don't think it's too likely, but I'd still like if it happened. I want to say that Asura wins. Broly beats most of his forms, but his strategy of just toying around with his opponents seems like it would really work against him. And Asura's final form is able to go toe-to-toe with the creator of his universe who throws galaxies at him, so I want to assume that's enough to beat Broly. Scott Pilgrim vs Travis Touchdown is a match I have next to nothing to add to. Scott is Travis's most popular matchup, except for maybe Jack Kamen? But I think they'd go with Scott because of the popularity boost he's going to get from his game re-releasing. Travis wins from what I hear, but as long as they have a fight that resembles anything from the Scott Pilgrim movie, then I'm down for it. Not much more to say there. Giorno vs Joker I hear is a massive stomp, but nobody seems to agree on who it is that does the stomping. I've never played Persona or watched Jojo, so I don't know or care. This is a case of a more recently popular fight rather than one with history, but I can still see it happening. Kira vs Adachi is the other popular Jojo vs Persona fight I've heard tossed around, but I just find that one way more boring. And also Crossover X is doing that episode, and with DJ Tiki on the research team, I don't think they'd want to steal his thunder. The best thing this episode could give me is an incredibly funny soundbite of Boomstick saying,
"For his neutral special, he wields a gun."
And maybe follow up with Wiz saying,
"That's right, Boomstick."
Basically, if this becomes one of the meme episodes amongst me and my group of friends that reads out all the shitty inside jokes, then I'm all for it. Now for the only Battle Royale I have on this list. The Cereal Mascot Battle Royale would just be amazing. This has been brought up on the Death Battlecast so many times, and every single time it just devolves into madness over Captain Crunch versus the Raisin Bran Sun. This would be a phenomenal joke episode, but I have no idea who would win since I have no idea who they'd actually use. I would unironically want this more than the Disney Princess Battle Royale, even though the latter is probably more likely. Next is probably the least likely match I've gone with, Splinter vs Shifu. I adore the Kung Fu Panda films, so seeing them get any kind of representation at all would be amazing. In fact, despite having a lot of versus viable characters, DreamWorks films, no, scratch that, films in general don't have much representation on the show at all. I don't know which Splinter they'd use. My favourite one is the 2012 one, but I'd understand if they focused primarily on a different one. Seeing how they'd handle a fight where the difference in size between the characters is this massive would be cool to see. Shifu has a pretty unique fighting style compared to most characters Death Battle's used. Unfortunately, despite me preferring Shifu, he loses to most incarnations of Splinter from what I hear. But I like Splinter a lot, especially the 2012 version, so I don't mind much at all. Shifu's only win condition is the whooshy finger hold, but I doubt he'd be fast enough to pull it off. And even if he was, it wouldn't be a first resort. It would be a fun fight though. The episode happening means they would at least have to name drop Tai Lung, and that would make me very happy. If they somehow didn't name drop him, then you could expect a full half-hour long rant video, regardless of how good the episode actually is. Remember when I said people wanted Mysterio to fight Freddy Krueger? I've mentioned how I hate that it would take away the best remaining Marvel vs DC fight, but I also don't like how it wastes Freddy on a Marvel fight. I far prefer Freddy vs Pennywise. Multiverse Match already did this fight, and I think they did a great job on it, but seeing it done with such a high budget would be incredible. Nothing I can add here that I haven't said for Mysterio vs Scarecrow, or also Piccolo vs Martian Manhunter, I guess. The only limit to the creative potential of the animation is their imagination. I do still prefer Mysterio vs Scarecrow though, since that one isn't nearly as stompy. That's my biggest issue with Freddy vs Pennywise. Freddy could take down a Pennywise avatar, no problem, but the true form of it is apparently multiversal at worst, and at best is setting up an out-reversal. Poor Freddy wouldn't stand a chance. I still do think the fight has a solid chance of happening though. I feel we're long overdue for a horror death battle. The closest we've gotten would be the symbiote episodes, minus the shit one. I know Jason vs Michael is the go-to for that, and I would certainly prefer it, but it wouldn't feel right to have Jason vs Michael be anything other than live action. And we are definitely not getting another live action fight in Season 8. Budget issues aside, COVID's gonna put the brakes on any live action episodes for the foreseeable future, more than likely. So with Jason vs Michael out of the picture, Freddy vs Pennywise seems like it could be a really fun Halloween-y episode. I've liked every match I've brought up so far in this video, but this is where that streak ends, unfortunately. Red Hulk vs Atrocitus is one of the biggest remaining Marvel vs DC fights. On one hand, I'm down for more creative Lantern fights. On the other, this is Marvel vs DC. Odds are Atrocitus wins, odds are the episode would be boring as fuck. I have nothing left to add for this. Just gotta fill the quota for Marvel vs DC, and Nemesis took Ant-Man vs the Atom, which is the only other likely one that I actually like. Back to matches that would actually excite me, Minecraft vs Terraria, or Steve vs Terrarian, whichever one they'd end up titling it. This is one of the matches on the list with the most history, and with Minecraft's recent boost in popularity thanks to Steve getting into Smash, I can see this happening next season for sure. I really like both of these games, but I'd probably root for Steve to win. The fight could play around with both building higher and higher up until they eventually turn it into an aerial battle, since I'm pretty sure both can fly. I'd be super curious to see how they would write an analysis for this episode, since these are Avatar characters and don't really have canon personalities. If the animation didn't end with a game over screen from the loser's game, then, well, what's even the point? Another video game rivalry I'm surprised they haven't tackled yet is Phoenix Wright vs Professor Layton. Not a match I care for much, since I'm kinda just sick of hearing about Wright in verses from some groups I'm in, but it has enough history to where I think it has a shot of happening. I have no experience with either, I have no idea who wins, but I would really want there to be a lot of back and forth banter with the Ace Attorney speech bubbles. Maybe the fight could start because they both think the other's a main suspect of a murder, and they could have some back and forth banter in the fight where they accuse each other. I'm not sure, I don't really know these characters very well. Wright obviously stomps because Marvel vs Capcom is very clearly canon, so he scales to Galactus. Another fight I don't care for but still think it should happen, Jimmy vs Dexter. I don't know why, but I've just never really liked this fight. Haven't watched either show, don't see an animation style complementing them both, but it's still a matchup with a lot of history, and I think it deserves to happen. I'm surprised we haven't had any Cartoon Network vs Nickelodeon episodes at all, and even if I don't care for these specific characters, I do still think we're long overdue for more cartoon representation in Death Battle. I wouldn't be hyped for this episode, but I've made peace with it happening eventually, and I'd be happy for whoever did want it. Don't know who wins though. I think the Predator has a really solid chance of appearing next season, since there are two really highly requested matchups that I've seen thrown around for it to fight. There's the Xenomorph, which is an iconic movie rivalry, but I don't think this one has a very high chance. The whole fun of Death Battle is seeing different series cross over. Alien and Predator take place in the same universe, and they've had two crossover movies, which just blatantly shows who would win. One which is a lot of dumb fun, and the sequel where they just forgot to take the lens cap off the camera. Predator vs Arbiter, however, is one I think has a pretty good shot. It's by far the highest requested fight I've seen for both characters, and I would love to see Halo represented in versus with a character that isn't Master Chief for once. And from what I hear, Halo has way higher stats than Predator generally, but I'm not sure how much of that the Arbiter scales to, and even then, how would Predator's self-destruct play into it? Would that count as a draw? This isn't like Night Guy where Predator would win the battle before they died, since the explosion would technically reach them first. Ben has said he actively tries to avoid making fights end in draws, so I don't think they'd cop out like that. A fight between these two could be really interesting from both an analytical standpoint and an animation standpoint. Both can start out fighting at a range, and maybe at some point Arbiter gets disarmed and Predator puts its plasma cannon away to have a fair close range fight with their blades. I don't know, I'm just kinda spitballing ideas here. This is one of the matches on this list that I want the most. But for a match I'm not keen on, Sly Cooper vs Rouge the Bat. People seem to want Sly vs Lupin, but I sided with this one since A, Sly vs Rouge is one I've seen requested way more for far longer, while Sly vs Lupin is a more recently requested match, and B, Lupin's fight is with Kaito Kid. I would genuinely pop off for that episode almost as much as I would for All For One vs the Annihilator. Now, I don't particularly like Sly vs Rouge, and that is definitely not the fault of Sly. He seems like a really cool character, and I'd love to learn more about him. Also, Sly lends himself perfectly to a stealth-based battle, and I love when those are done right. My issue is Rouge. I don't dislike her, but I hate Sonic in versus in general. Nobody agrees on their stats. I've seen people genuinely unironically try to debate stuff like Multiversal Charmy the Bee, and that base Sonic is stronger than Super Sonic. I just don't like it, and I will actively avoid writing for Sonic matches for any versus show I'm on unless I don't have to write the verdict. And I'm just going to take a shot in the dark and say that Rouge wins through scaling to other Sonic characters, though I definitely prefer if Sly won. I prefer his design by a lot. Jenny Wakeman vs Robotboy is a match I have little to no connection to. I've never watched My Life as a Teenage Robot, and I haven't watched Robotboy in years, and even then I never saw that much of it to begin with. But I've seen this requested pretty frequently, and from what I've heard, it's pretty close, so it could lead to a more in-depth conclusion, which I always appreciate. They also have a lot of veritable versatility, so the fight scene has a lot of potential as well. This would have to be a hand-on episode. I really wouldn't want this to go down the route of Danny vs Jake with the stiff puppet animation. Master Hand vs Polygon Man would probably be a very difficult episode to make a super long analysis for, but the Smash vs PlayStation All-Stars rivalry has enough history to where I think this match has a solid chance of happening. Plus, I'd call a battle between two final boss characters season finale worthy. People don't seem to like the 1 minute melee of this match, but I think they'd be able to see what people did and didn't like from that episode and adapt it into a death battle. And by what people did like, I mean literally just Master Hand weaponizing Final Destination and nothing else really. They could also have both characters summon the characters from their game's rosters to fight in some sort of army battle. They could also have both characters, actually use their unique powers. I know Master Hand in particular has a bunch of cool abilities to use, like creating cards, blobs of paint, firing lasers, and burying his opponents in the ground. And that's without even bringing up Master Core, which could allow for some stellar hand-drawn stuff on the level of Mob vs Tatsumaki. Polygon Man probably also has some cool abilities and forms. I have no idea, I've barely played PlayStation All-Stars. Master Hand is treated as the creator of the entire Smash universe, so I'm gonna assume he wins. Sailor Moon vs Seiya, despite me never watching an episode of either show, is still a match I'd really like to see just because I'm really interested to learn about these characters. And I think it has a solid chance of happening. It's a pretty long time request due to them being two of the most blatantly overpowered anime protagonists out there. From what I hear, it's probably a stomp for Seiya, but I'd root for Moon. Not because I feel bad for the fanbase after Beerus vs Galaxia destroyed the series' reputation in Versus, but because Seiya is much like Alien X and Archie Sonic in the sense that he's been built up as this unbeatable god in the Versus community, and I think he really needs a humbling. Bill Cipher is a character I really want Death Battle to use, to the point where I've considered making an entire video on 10 possible opponents for him. Shuma Gorath is my personal favourite, Bobobo and Dementio are good options too, but I think Death Battle is going to go with Discord. This is easily the match I've seen requested the most for both, and I really like it. It has potential to be a really fun and creative fight with a really interesting analysis, since both have a ton of lore to dive into, Bill especially. I'd love a match that focuses more on characters and abilities as opposed to stats, and since these characters can't really have numbers applied to them, then I feel this is a perfect way to do that without blatantly not bringing up any feats for either. The animation would mainly be what would interest me though. This has infinite potential to be the most visually creative death battle they've ever done thanks to both of the reality warping, so hopefully they'd make good use of it. I'm not sure who wins, both characters are really difficult to lock down stats for, but Bill Cipher's one of my favourite characters ever, so I can't not root for him. And finally, Ghost Rider vs Spawn, one of the few Marvel fights left that I actually like. This fight has been requested for years, and I was genuinely shocked when Ghost Rider was put against Lobo instead. It would be cool to see the fight start in their base forms, but then eventually turn into having Zarathos fight God Spawn. As much as I loved Zarathos in Ghost Rider vs Lobo, he didn't really get to do much. Seeing him actually get to throw down, take hits, and get more than 2 lines would be amazing. And Godspawn wasn't used at all against Kratos, so I'd be interested to see how they'd go about that. There's genuine debate surrounding who would win as well, which I like a lot. They could go super in depth with the conclusion, which I really want them to do more. If Ghost Rider won, they could have a penance stare death that has Spawn in even more agony than Lobo, since Spawn's soul wouldn't be eaten almost immediately. Lobo's death is one of my favourites in Death Battle history, and Spawn's has the potential to be even better. That's assuming Ghost Rider wins though. It's entirely possible that Spawn could take it. I have no idea. That's why I like this match so much, it doesn't have a clear winner. Predictability has been a problem with a lot of death battles lately, so hopefully we'd get a match like this soon which just completely throws us all for a loop. And those are 20 episodes I think will happen next season. Do I expect them all? Definitely not. Since Nemesis got first dibs, I definitely had to scrape the bottom of the barrel for some of these, but there are a few that I think are more likely than a lot of the ones on his list. Regardless, I hope Season 8 has some good matches. Season 7's been pretty bad in regards to the hype behind the actual matchups. If we can get a season list that's as good as what Season 5 had, then I think we'll be in a pretty good position. But that's all for this video. Go check out Nemesis's list as well if you haven't seen it. That'll be linked in the description. I'll see you all in the next video.